Pharmacist Ben. How are you
Hey,
today?
I'm good. Good to see you. Good
Oh,
evening
good.
from my end. Good day from your end.
Yes, yeah, here in Oz. So, Ben, we had a headline in our local news here. There's the title is Legal Firm Eyes Class Action Investigation Over Heartburn Drugs Used by Millions of Aussies. Now, this really hits home to your mission in life, which is to give alternative
Yes.
options to
Yes.
pharmaceutical drugs.
Yeah. Well,
Safe alternative options.
yeah, we're not given options. You go to the doctor, you don't get options, especially in countries where they have free medicine. When you get free medicine, the doctor doesn't work for you. The doctor
That's
works for the
right.
government. And when the doctor works for the doctor has to do whatever the government says. And if the government makes deals with drug companies, and then the doctor has to dispense the meds. The doctor doesn't get to tailor a protocol for you. The doctor
Yeah.
doesn't even need to look at you. They go to a book and they see what the protocol is. And in fact, in this country anyway, there's a concept they call standards of care, which require physicians to do certain things at risk of their license. They can lose their license if they don't give a statin drug, for example, to somebody who has a cholesterol issue, or perhaps a PPI, proton pump inhibitor, or somebody who has a heartburn drug. I'm not sure exactly what the standards of care are, but the point is that doctors who work for the government don't work for you. They do whatever the government has to say. And even if they don't strictly work for the government, in this country anyway, they have to follow what are called standards of care. So what we're about giving options that perhaps patients didn't know about. Patients sometimes have no idea that there are nutritional options, that there are lifestyle options, that there are causes for people, their health challenges, their chronic degenerative disease health challenges that are modifiable by things that they're doing, or that are caused by things that are doing. They're not given those kinds of options. But part of it also has to do with us, or as the patient. We as patients have to understand that we're responsible for our health, and to abdicate health to the physician, while it may be nice and easy, and we're conditioned to do that, has a cost. In this case, and this is a classic example, people are taking these PPI drugs, proton pump inhibitor drugs that suppress stomach acid, and they run into kidney problems. And it turns out that kidney issues and chronic kidney disease and acute kidney disease is associated with long-term use of these proton pump inhibitors. And they actually advise people who have chronic kidney disease to take these drugs carefully. Proton pump inhibitors, unfortunately, are taken chronically because people have chronic acid problems. They're not taken just once in a while. People are just live on PPIs, and they feel like they don't have to change the way they eat, or they don't have to change the way they're processing food at the level of the intestine. People don't just have heartburn. In fact, I would venture to say most people who have gastroesophageal, stomach, esophagus, gastroesophageal reflux, stuff coming up, reflux disease, oftentimes don't even know that it has something to do with what they're eating, or don't even realize it has something to do with a laxity of the sphincter, the so-called lower esophageal sphincter that connects the stomach to the esophagus. Now, I've had GERD enough times in my life to know how miserable it is. I haven't had it chronically, but I can only imagine what that's like. However, when you suppress stomach acid pharmacologically, essentially poisoning the acid production system, this is how drugs work. I'm not saying this poetically or rhetorically. This is literally how these medications work. They suppress biochemistry. They suppress cellular activity. In this case, they suppress the production of acid at the level of the cells by poisoning, they say inhibiting, but really it's poisoning, the so-called proton pump, which is responsible for pumping hydrogen, which is acid essentially, not exactly, but is the marker of acid. It blocks the marker of acid. Hydrogen, a proton pump inhibitor, blocks the action of hydrogen, thereby suppressing acid. The problem is reflux disease is not a sign of too much acid. It's a sign of a loose sphincter, dysbiosis, problems with foods, not the production of acid. And you need stomach acid. Stomach acid is responsible for killing bacteria. Without stomach acid, you can't absorb your vitamins. You can't absorb your minerals. You can't activate your enzymes. Without stomach acid, you can't break up proteins. So stomach acid is incredibly, incredibly important. Without stomach acid, you run risks of malabsorption of nutrients downstream at the level of the intestine. You run the risks of bacterial overgrowth at the level of the intestine because acid is supposed to kill bacteria. So without stomach acid, not only are you going to suffer from nutrient absorption, but you're also going to suffer or malabsorption of nutrients, but you're also going to suffer intestinal problems in terms of SIBO. On top of all that, you're going to suffer from all the signs of deficiencies of B vitamins and of minerals and of proteins and all the other nutrients that aren't getting absorbed because you're not making enough stomach acid. So there's always a price to be paid when you're using a prescription drug. If you're using a prescription drug once in a while, okay, so your body can recover. The body's very forgiving that way. But if you take a drug chronically, you're going to run the risks of toxicity, adverse reactions, and side effects. In the case of drugs that affect the digestive system, you're also going to run the risks of malabsorption of nutrients and essentially malnourishment. And you're going to run the risks of problems downstream at the level of the intestine, at the level of the digestive system, specifically the intestine. And we know that all disease begins at the level of the intestine. So it's really crazy for a patient and irresponsible for a healthcare professional to put somebody on a prescription drug without addressing the problem. And this is what we're about at Youngevity. And this is what I personally about. It's about telling the patient that there are choices, there are options that solve the problem without having to deal with prescription drugs. If you're on a prescription drug once in a while, that's one thing. But when you take a drug chronically, you're going to end up with problems. In the case of PPIs, they're not proton pump inhibitors. They're not the most toxic of the drugs. There's way more toxic drugs than proton pump inhibitor drugs. But because they affect the digestive system and our ability to absorb nutrients, you're going to run into problems with malnourishment. And because they affect the digestive system downstream, you're going to run into problems at the level of the first point on the triangle of disease, which of course leads to everything else.
Right. I'll just zoom back
so
in.
What do you do if you have this condition? GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. Heartburn is when it occurs like in the chest area, but you can have it come back up. I don't know if you ever had this. It is an unbelievably miserable experience. You know, I used to get it when I ate late at night. I mean, I haven't eaten late at night. I imagine if I eat late at night, I'll probably still have the problem. When I ate late at night, when I ate a heavy meal late at night, especially a carbohydrate, processed food rich meal, especially dessert type foods late at night, if I ate a lot of them, I would get it. And let me tell you something, and I've only had it 4 or 5 times in my life, but it is miserable. And some people get this all the time. So number one, see if you can associate it with foods, specific foods, and then eliminate those foods, obviously. That's number one. A lot of people have problems specifically with refined carbohydrates, gluten, wheat, grain, cereals, and that kind of thing. So, but it don't have any preconceived ideas about what foods it is. Look for the foods that are linked to the incidences of reflux. That's number one. Number two, drinking more water can dilute the stomach secretions. And so even if you do have splashback at that point, it'll be dilute. That's another thing you can do. Thirdly, work at the level of the intestine. Part of the problem with reflux is gases that are coming up from the intestine pushing everything up. So in addition to the loose sphincter, upwards pressure from the intestine can cause problems. So working with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, using food strategies like a low FODMAPs diet can help. Working with leaky gut can help. Using I-26 or essential oils to kill the bacteria can help. Correcting dysbiosis issues, problems with gut bacteria, using probiotics, using fiber can help. Eating less calories can help. But most importantly, consider it to be a food problem. There are some structural issues occasionally that can be a problem. People have hiatal hernias will get gastroesophageal reflux disease. If you have a hiatal hernia, you got to manipulate. There are chiropractors who claim they can manipulate it. I can't speak to that, but they say they can. Other than that, you have to have a surgical procedure to correct a hiatal hernia. Aside from the structural problems that can cause acid reflux, you want to think about it as a food issue and B, as a intestinal issue. And then another very interesting phenomenon that can occur, and this is really fascinating, low stomach acid, which occurs much more frequently than too much stomach acid. Low stomach acid is called hypo, that means low, as opposed to hyper, which means excess. Hypochlorhydria. Chlor for chloric, hydria for hydrochloric acid. Hypochlorhydria refers to low hydrochloric acid. Under conditions of low stomach acid, ironically, the sphincter will become loose And the stomach, as it shakes around, the stomach is mechanically grinding food. It's sort of moving around. Under conditions of a loose sphincter, which can occur when you have low stomach acid, the little stomach acid that's in the stomach can splash back up. So in a way, low stomach acid can actually be a cause of hypochlorhydria. Or, I'm sorry, it can be a cause of reflux. Hypochlorhydria can be a cause of reflux. So that's another little ironic sort of mechanism that can occur. Long story short, if you're not absorbing your minerals, which you may not be if you're using a PPI, if you're not absorbing your B vitamins, which you may not be doing if you're using a PPI, if you're not breaking up proteins, which may happen if you're using a PPI, so you're going to run into a whole host of problems, not just kidney issues. You can run into osteoporosis problems, weak bones, scoliosis issues, calcification perhaps can occur, hardening of tissues can occur. There's all kinds of things that can throw off biochemistry when you suppress stomach acid pharmacologically, which is essentially poisoning the pharmacological or the biochemistry of a cell. Pharmacology poisons, period. It's not like you take a drug and you have this kind of normal biochemical process that occurs in response to that drug. It's basically, the system is basically being poisoned.
Helicobacter pylori, Ben? Is that a bit of a...
And that's another issue. H. pylori is oftentimes involved with low stomach acid, and H. pylori can be, by virtue of its low stomach acid, by virtue of its suppressant effect on stomach acid, can actually be can be associated with reflux disease.
Because you're leaving yourself open to bacterial infection.
Yeah, because acid is, that's one of the mechanisms the body has for killing bacteria.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, it's a pretty big issue, this, and
yes, it's easy to address. It's easy to address with lifestyle strategies.
Yes, great, thanks. And Ben has mentioned a few longevity products on this call here, so you can see his website. Okay. Bottom of the screen. You can source them all on his website. Just type in a search for the different names that he's mentioned, but Ultimate Enzymes, that's obviously one of the top things to help with this issue. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thanks so much.
So all health challenges. Let me just say this last thing I'll say. All chronic degenerative diseases can be backtracked to lifestyle strategies, things that involve how we live our lives, whether it involves exercise, sleep, breathing, and of course, diet, food, and as well as nutritional supplementation. Always look for safe, natural alternatives that address the causes of health challenges. In my suggestion, before you go the medical route and use pharmacology or surgical procedures or whatever, ablations or x-rays or radiation, if you have the options available to you, take those options. And that's what we're all about here at Young Jeff.
So Ben, we've got a question here. Suzanne's asking, what about when you have no gallbladder and have heartburn after eating or fasting?
You got a problem. You got to use gallbladder in a bottle. Yeah, you got to use gallbladder in a bottle. If you're suppressing stomach acid, you're going to suppress digestive function. If you suppress digestive function, you're going to be running the risks not only of malnourishment, but further toxicity downstream, or further impairment of the digestive process downstream. Leaky gut, SIBO, all the things we talk about on this program all the time. Now, if you don't have a gallbladder, two things are true. Number one, you're obviously going to have a problem digesting, particularly fats. And if you're thinking about having your gallbladder out, it's being suggested to you, you should know that there is no such thing as a safe gallbladder surgery, cholecystectomy. They always will have some kind of digestive implications. So if you're going to have your gallbladder taken out, if you have to have your gallbladder taken out, you're going to run into problems. The second thing is, if you have your gallbladder taken out, presumably you had it out because you had a digestive issue, because you had a food problem, because you weren't processing food correctly, and taking the gallbladder out isn't going to all of a sudden correct your digestive problem. It's going to make it worse. So number one, just taking your gallbladder out, obviously you're now like a heavyweight fighter in the ring, trying to fight a heavyweight fight with one arm tied behind your back. digestion is the hardest thing the body has to do. And now you've taken out one of its main digestive structures. And the second thing is you had the gallbladder taken out, presumably because you already had digestive impairment. And now you're going to make the problem worse. So if you have your gallbladder taken out, what do you do? Well, first of all, it's imperative that you be very careful with the kind of foods you're eating. Super fatty foods are going to be hard to process. So if you're eating fatty foods, which you need to eat, you want to eat smaller portions. And you want to make sure that the fats you're eating are not processed fats. It's true for everybody, but especially if you have impairment at the level of the gallbladder or some kind of fat malabsorption issues. So staying away from processed fats and eating smaller portions of fats. Make absolutely sure you're supplementing with fatty vitamins, which are vitamins D, E, A, and K, DEEK, because you're not going to be getting them out of your foods. Make sure you're supplementing with essential fatty acids because you're not going to be getting them out of your foods. Now, you're always going to have a little bit of bile that comes in from the liver. This is why physicians feel comfortable taking out a gallbladder, because they say, oh, well, you have a little bit of bile. And that's true. But the problem is that low level of bile is not only not enough for maximum absorption of fatty nutrients, but that low level of bile can actually cause some irritation at the level of the intestine, which can cause diarrhea and cause loose stools, which are also a problem. So making sure you're paying very close attention to the foods you're eating, making sure you're supplementing, using small portions of fatty foods, which you do need to eat, but not processed fats, and then also using gallbladder duplicating, I guess I'll say, or analogs of gallbladder juices, bile salts. The gallbladder makes bile, so making sure you're using bile salts or nutrients that help you build bile. Taurine is an amino acid, for example, that helps you build bile. Bile is largely composed of phospholipids like lecithin, so make sure you're supplementing with those. Longevity's ultimate enzymes, in a way you can think of them as, this is what Dr. Wallach calls them, a gallbladder in a bottle, because it contains phospholipids and it contains bile salts. You can use your ultimate enzymes, but you also want to make sure that you're supplementing with extra bile salts and extra phospholipids like lecithin, or eating foods, organ meats, and eggs that contain lecithin. There's one more thing I was going to say. I forgot what I was going to say. For the gallbladder. Making sure that you're using baking soda. Baking soda is not for the gallbladder, it's from the pancreas, but it can support alkalinization of the acidic foods that acidic substance that drops in from the stomach into the intestine. Real quick, when you eat a food, it goes into your mouth and your esophagus, into your stomach, and in the stomach, it gets ground up by mechanical action of the stomach, and it gets dissolved, I guess you could say, by acid and enzymes and gastric juices. And then the food is acidic at this point, it's low pH, and it drops into the intestine. And right there, that acid is supposed to trigger pancreatic juices and enzymes and baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, and bile from the gallbladder. They both are supposed to hit that food as it goes into the intestine, and then that breaks up the fatty substances. The alkaline, high pH juices from the pancreas and the bile hit the acid, low pH food, and you get a fizzing reaction, kind of like when you were in high school or when you're in elementary school and you mix lemon juice with baking soda, or I don't know what they use, acid alkaline, you get an acid-base reaction. If you don't have a gallbladder, that's not going to happen. If you don't have a gallbladder, you're not going to get that alkaline hit. So supporting that alkalinity becomes important, and that's why baking soda can help, and also bile salts, your ultimate enzymes, lecithin, things that help you make bile, taurine, glycine. These are the building block components of bile. And you know what the most important building block component of bile is? Cholesterol. Bile is actually a form of cholesterol, as it turns out.
So when would you have the baking soda? As you eat?
No, not as you eat. Not as you eat. You don't want to do it as you eat because that's going to neutralize your stomach acid. You want to wait till a few hours later, 3, 4, 5 hours later, as the food hits your intestine.
Right. Yeah, I was wondering that. Yeah. So, okay, Mary or Suzanne, if you've got any more questions, just quickly pop them in. But I think we'll wind this up any minute.
Okay. So, great to see you, Michelle. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you like this kind of stuff, we're looking for folks who we can mentor and we can teach about health. about nutrition, and especially folks who want to build a business, we can help you build a business. So not only can you help your friends and help yourself and your family with nutrition, with health, but you can also make some money, a little bit of money or a lot of money in your spare time.
Yep. So anyone listening, Ben's mission is to empower people with
Choices.
information, yes, where
Choices.
they can have choices to pharmaceutical drugs.
Yes.
Yeah. So he was really wanting to mentor anyone who's out there and wants to help a whole network of people to get well and, you know, get off their pharmaceutical bus.
Yeah, you know, and it's all well and good that we have a system that allows us to sue drug companies, you know, because they do some misleading things, but ultimately it's up to us. You can't take a prescription drug and not expect to pay a cost. Occasionally, if you take a drug occasionally, that's one thing. But if you take a drug chronically, there's always going to be a cost. And we haven't even talked about the detoxification of that drug, which of course costs you precious nutrients like vitamin C and copper and magnesium and zinc and the B complex, all of which are involved in the production of liver enzymes that are responsible for detoxifying the drug that you took in the first place. And that deficiency, the health challenges that are caused by those deficiencies don't get counted as side effects. They don't count as adverse reactions. They'll look like they're a completely different health challenge, and it's a rare healthcare professional or patient who's going to link their health challenge to a nutrient deficiency that's caused by taking a drug. And that's above and beyond the adverse reactions and side effects that all drugs have.
Okay. So if any of you really would like some personal mentoring from Pharmacist Ben to help a whole network of people you have, shoot us an email at info@pharmacistbenjaminfuchs.com and we'll get you on board and start the mission. Thank you so much. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you so much. Great to see you and see everybody, and we'll talk to you.